Hey everyone, ready for a deep dive with me tonight? We're going to be looking at the Atlanta Lovers Lane murders, a series of unsolved shootings from early 1977.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's our main source is this Wikipedia article detailing the cases, and it's a wild ride. Three couples attacked, same .38 caliber pistol used every time, a possible pattern, but the killer was never caught.
Huh.
So what happened during those few terrifying months? Let's find out.
What's interesting to me is how these cases, though scary in their own right,
Hmm.
have been kind of overshadowed by the Atlanta child murders. That started later that same year.
It's true. Sometimes those individual tragedies get lost, in the shadow of larger events. But tonight we're bringing those individual stories back into focus. The first attack happened on January 16th, 1977. A car crashes into a street sign, and when the police get there, they find a naked couple inside, both shot.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
So the victims, 26-year-old LeBrian Lovett and 25-year-old Veronica Hill. They weren't just victims of a random crash. They were likely intimate in a secluded area, known as the Lover's Lane, in Adams Park. It seems someone opened fire through the car window. Lovett, though, badly wounded, tried to drive for help, but crashed.
So what are your initial thoughts on this first attack? Anything that jumps out at you?
I think the location is significant. The fact that they were targeted at a Lover's Lane suggests a possible motive. Was this a crime of passion or someone with a vendetta against couples?
That's a chilling thought, someone specifically targeting couples. And things get even more unsettling when we look at the next attack. Less than a month later, on February 12th, another couple, 18-year-old Dennis Langston and 17-year-old Deatira Tatum, are attacked in West Manor Park. Also, while in a parked car in a secluded area, same MO, shots fired through the passenger window.
Yeah, but there is a key difference here. Both Langston and Tatum survived this attack. They later described the assailant as a tall black male. And crucially, ballistics confirmed that the same .38 caliber pistol was used in both attacks.
So this second attack, so soon after the first, raises a terrifying possibility. Could this be a serial attacker, someone specifically targeting couples in these secluded locations?
The evidence definitely seems to point in that direction. The same weapon, the similar circumstances, and the fact that both incidents occurred in Lovers' Lanes. It's a pattern that's hard to ignore.
Imagine the fear gripping Atlanta at this point. Two attacks, seemingly unconnected locations, both targeting couples in vulnerable situations.
And then on March 12th, just a month after the second attack, it happens again. 21-year-old Diane Collins and her fiancé are shot in their car after a date. Sadly, Diane is killed, but her fiancé survives, managing to drive home, despite a head wound, to call for help.
This escalation is just heartbreaking. 3 attacks, now a fatality, and a pattern that's becoming increasingly clear. I can't even imagine the pressure on the police to find this attacker.
Yeah, faced with a city on edge and a potential serial killer on the loose.
Yeah.
The pressure was huge, but they did act quickly, confirming that the same .38 caliber weapon was used in all 3 shootings. So their theory of serial attacker, targeting couples, specifically in Lovers' Lanes, was solidified.
Knowing this was a pattern, did they have any leads or possible suspects?
They noticed a chilling detail. There was a 3-week cycle between the attacks. This led them to stake out parks, anticipating the next strike would occur sometime between April 6th and 8th.
So they were ready, waiting for him to strike again. Did their plan work?
Sadly, no. The next attack never came.
Wait, the killer just vanished.
It seems that way. The case went cold, overshadowed by the horrific Atlanta child murders, which began just a few months later.
So here we are, over 40 years later, still trying to make sense of these attacks. 3 distinct incidents, all linked by the same weapon, and a seemingly deliberate choice of victims and locations. But then, just as abruptly as it began, it stops. What happened? Did the police ever have any other theories beyond this 3-week cycle they were focused on?
Well, the sources we have don't really go into any other specific theories or suspects. However, the fact that the attacks all happened in Lovers' Lanes, suggests that the perpetrator might have had some resentment.
Anger towards couples. It's like they were punishing these couples for their intimacy, which makes the sudden stop even more puzzling. Did the police ever think that maybe something happened to the killer, like maybe they got arrested for a different crime or left the state, or maybe something in their life just changed drastically?
Those are all good points. And it's frustrating that we don't have more information to really explore those avenues.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of cold cases. They tease us with these unanswered questions.
It really does make you wonder what other details might be hidden.
The Wikipedia article doesn't mention any direct connections being investigated, but it does list a couple other interesting cases. The Mineral Washington murders, and then kind of a more general category of serial killers in the United States.
Mm.
And while those aren't really explored in detail, they do serve as important reminders to think about the broader context here.
Mm.
Could there be similarities in their MO,
Mm.
victim profiles, or even geographic patterns that connect these seemingly separate cases?
You're right. It's like trying to piece together this giant puzzle. We have this cluster of attacks in Atlanta, and then these other cases happening in other places. Makes you wonder if there's a missing piece somewhere. That could connect them all.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. And it's that possibility, that little glimmer of hope, that fuels so many cold case investigations. The idea that even decades later, a new piece of evidence, a fresh perspective, or a link to another case could finally bring justice and closure to the victims and their families.
And speaking of the victims, it's important to remember that these aren't just stories or statistics. These were real people whose lives were cut short or changed forever by these events. LeBrian Lovett, Veronica Hill, Diane Collins, they all had families, friends, hopes, dreams. It's sad to think their stories have been mostly forgotten, overshadowed by other events.
Absolutely. And while the trail may have gone cold, someone out there knows what happened. Someone might have the key to solving this mystery. By keeping these stories alive, by continuing to ask questions and explore all the possibilities, we can honor their memories and maybe one day shed some light on the darkness that surrounds these unsolved crimes.
Well said. As we've been talking about these attacks, I keep thinking about the time period, 1977. That was a crazy year, especially in Atlanta. Racial tensions were high, and the city was already dealing with the early stages of the Atlanta child murders. I can only imagine the fear and uncertainty that gripped the community.
It's super important to consider that historical context. 1977, Atlanta was a city on edge. This was just a few years after the peak of the civil rights movement. And the city was still dealing with, the social and political changes that came with it.
Do you think that the Lover's Lane killer might have deliberately chosen that time to strike? Knowing that the city was already on high alert, maybe hoping to blend in and avoid being caught in all the chaos?
Yeah, it really is a chilling thought. To think that somebody might exploit that kind of upheaval to commit these awful acts, it really adds another layer to this already complex case.
It makes you wonder if we're even seeing the whole picture. We have these attacks on couples, the backdrop of all this racial tension, the Atlanta child murders looming. It's like we're trying to solve a puzzle, but we're missing some of the pieces. What do you think is the most important aspect of all of this?
I think this is unanswered questions. These unsolved crimes, though they've been largely forgotten, they still haunt us, making us want to find an explanation. To connect all the dots, it really challenges us to try and make sense of something. It just doesn't make sense.
And it reminds us that these tragedies had a real human cost. LeBrian Lovett, Veronica Hill, Diane Collins, these weren't just names in a police report. They were people with lives and loves and dreams that were cut short or changed forever.
So what do you think is the biggest takeaway for our listeners? The thing they should really think about after this?
I'd say it's this. Even in the midst of these big crises, individual acts of violence still matter. Each victim has a story and a life that deserves to be recognized and honored. We can't allow these tragedies to just fade away. That's a great point. And while we may never have all the answers, it's so important to keep asking the questions, to keep these stories in our minds. Maybe someday someone will come forward with new information, or a new piece of evidence will surface, or maybe just someone will look at it from a different angle, and we can finally understand what happened during those dark months back in 1977. This deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about, and I hope it's done the same for you. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and never stop searching for the truth.